They whispered that her medals were bought. They laughed that her story was stitched from lies. But the room froze when a three-star general stepped in, scanned her uniform, and spoke a sentence that turned every doubt into dust. That moment did not just defend her honor. It revealed ours. People often build entire stories from fragments of rumor, and this habit of reacting before understanding creates more harm than most realize. The first idea speaks to the danger of judging without knowing the journey because every uniform carries chapters that are never spoken aloud. When onlookers saw her medals, they rushed to assume they were fake. The room had been filled with chatter that came from shallow observation rather than real knowledge. This shows how quick people can be to label what they do not understand. Human beings tend to create conclusions from the surface since it demands no effort and no humility. Yet lives carved from discipline, sweat and hardship cannot be understood from a distance. The medal on a chest might represent a night where a person had to run through a storm of fire. The ribbon might carry the memory of a friend they could not save. The small metal pieces that seem decorative from afar often stand upon stories that took years to survive. Judging such symbols without knowing the journey is like calling a mountain fake by looking only at its shadow. It teaches us that the more complex the life, the more damaging our assumptions become. When people rely on shallow judgment, truth gets covered and honor becomes vulnerable. This keynote reminds us that understanding demands patience and respect. It pushes audiences to question the speed with which they form opinions and the way their assumptions may affect the lives of others. If one is not willing to learn the truth, then one should not speak it. The second keynote dives into the hidden weight carried by real service. Service does not announce itself loudly. Real service is carved inside the person, not displayed through shiny decorations. Those who serve understand that each medal is simply a map of difficult moments, and that behind every achievement lies a cost the world rarely sees. Many do not understand that veterans often carry invisible burdens, the memory of missions that stretch the limits of human endurance, the responsibility of protecting others, and the emotional fatigue of choices made under impossible circumstances. These stories remain tucked inside them because they have learned to keep their pain private. When the woman in the story walked into the room that day, she was carrying more than a set of medals. She was carrying the weight of everything she had lived through. People only saw metal, not the sacrifices that forged them. Real service teaches humility, and humility often makes a person less likely to defend themselves loudly. They do not feel the need to prove their worth because they already know what they endured. This keynote educates the audience about the emotional and psychological realities behind uniforms. It reminds them that the strongest people often look simple in silence, because their true battles happened long before the world began to judge them. The weight of service does not disappear after duty ends. It becomes part of who they are. And when that weight is mocked or doubted, the harm deepens. The third keynote explores the quiet resilience of those who refuse to defend themselves. There is a special kind of strength in choosing silence when the world demands explanation. Many people believe that resilience is loud, confrontational, or dramatic. In truth, some of the strongest individuals are those who simply choose not to respond. This is not weakness. It is clarity. When she was being accused of having fake medals, she did not argue or plead. Her silence was not surrender. It was dignity. She stood still because she knew that truth does not panic. She did not need to convince anyone. Her story was engraved into her life, and no rumor could rewrite it. Resilience often shows itself in the choice to avoid unnecessary battles. Those who have endured real danger do not waste energy on noise. They know which fights matter. They know that arguments built on ignorance are not worth the breath. This keynote teaches that silence can be powerful when it comes from someone who knows their own truth. It questions the assumption that only loud people are strong. If more individuals understood the quiet forms of resilience, they would learn to respect the ones who stand firm without raising their voice. Quiet strength changes rooms without shouting, and in this story, her silence became the foundation for the moment that followed. The fourth keynote examines the power of credible voices in restoring truth. When the three-star general walked in, everything changed. His presence acted like a beam of clarity cutting through fog. Authority is not about rank alone. It is about the weight of a life lived with integrity. His recognition of her medals did not just validate her. It dismantled every assumption in the room. There are moments when truth requires a witness who carries enough credibility to silence falsehood. Sometimes people refuse to believe until someone respected speaks. This is not ideal, but it reflects how society works. The general represented experience, history, and trust. When he confirmed that her medals were real, he did more than correct a rumor. He taught the room a lesson about honor. His words had the power to restore truth because he spoke from a place of knowledge. This keynote teaches the audience that credible voices matter deeply in moments of doubt. It encourages people who hold authority, leadership, or influence to speak when injustice appears. Silence from the credible strengthens the untrue. But a single statement from such a person can redirect the entire narrative. The general used his credibility to defend someone who had chosen to remain calm. That is what leadership looks like. The fifth keynote discusses the responsibility of bystanders when injustice unfolds. In the story, the people in the room were not actively attacking her, but they also did nothing to defend her. They whispered, they doubted, they watched. This reveals a truth about human behavior. Most people avoid involvement because they fear conflict or embarrassment. Yet injustice grows when bystanders stay silent. Every time a false accusation spreads, it survives because witnesses choose comfort over courage. The room only shifted when the general intervened, but the lesson is that those present could have spoken earlier. They could have asked questions respectfully instead of assuming. They could have prevented harm by encouraging fairness. The keynote teaches audiences that neutrality in the face of disrespect is not neutral at all. It supports the wrong side without meaning to. If people in everyday life learned to calm rumors instead of feeding them, many conflicts would shrink before they grew. The responsibility of bystanders is not always to fight loudly. Sometimes it is simply to question what does not feel right. The world becomes safer when ordinary people choose to uphold dignity. This keynote pushes the viewers to notice how their silence may impact others and how their voice, even gently used, could prevent harm. The sixth keynote brings everything together by showing how honor rises when courage meets clarity. Honor is not something people can give to you. It is something they recognize in you. When the general spoke, and when she stood with quiet dignity, honor became visible. It rose from the truth of her journey, from her resilience, from the correction of a false narrative, and from the learning that spread across the room. Honor grows when courage stands next to authenticity. Courage is what carried her through the battles that earned her the medals. Clarity is what the general brought when he corrected the misunderstanding. Together, they created a moment that lifted the room from ignorance to respect. This keynote helps the audience understand that honor is not about applause or attention. It is about living a life that remains steady under pressure. It is about choosing truth over panic, and dignity over argument. When courage and clarity meet, they teach others how to behave. They remind the world that character does not need permission to stand tall. Honor rises quietly, yet unmistakably, and once it rises, it changes the atmosphere around it.